on water quality and soil quality. So it's kind of the work that we are doing is still very much open and in development. And I've met a few of you here today, and I'm still building up partnerships. So that's kind of where I'm at. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Urban ag is a big part of what we have been trying to promote the last couple of years. So it's great to know that there's a resource out there. And if you are participating in the Conservation District's board meeting tomorrow, I'm an associate director, so I will see you.
Oh, okay.
I will see you at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay.
But good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Amanda.
Awesome. I'm glad to meet you too, Veronica, because part of an arm of what we're going to be doing is food sovereignty in an urban context. And so we'll have to connect. But my name is Amanda Funk. I am the executive director of the Weedock Todwin Center for Native Knowledge. We're a new nonprofit that's located in downtown Reading in the Jumpstart Incubator at the Berks County Community Foundation. And our mission is to promote the visibility of Native Americans in Berks County through community education, leadership, and activism. And one of the main drivers for founding this organization was growing up as an Indigenous person in this community and not having any sort of representation. I remember when I was young, there used to be an American Indian Festival at the Reading Public Museum on the grounds every year, and then that stopped happening, and there was nothing left in this area that would specifically draw Indigenous people, and it was a Native-focused event. And so there were few opportunities to engage with that Indigenous aspect of the identity here within my home community, and the only way to engage with it was to leave home and go elsewhere and connect with people. And in meeting all different kinds of Indigenous people who call Reading and Berks County home, it's the similar story of disconnection, of feeling invisible, of not having any sort of cultural touchstone locally, and not having the resources even to travel back home to tribal communities. It's not something I'm even able to do regularly. The last time I was on my tribal reservation was 2003, but it's costly to move the family, all the way to Oklahoma for a week of festivities and then bring them home. Not everybody has those kinds of resources to be able to tap into a tribal community that way. And so I was fortunate to still grow up with a strong connection to my tribe because we had different regional council meetings around the country. So typically we'd gather in like the Washington, D.C. area at least once a year. And in the past decade now have started doing a fall feast in the DC area each year, with the exception, of course, of the last 2 years. Hopefully we'll get back to that again this year. But that was the closest opportunity for me to engage with my Native community. And I was quite surprised to find out how many Native people call Berks County and the city of Reading home. And looking at our 2020 census results, over 9,000 people indicated that they have Indigenous ancestry, that they identify with that ethnicity. And what I think is crucial for us to understand is that we're all very multicultural people. We have tens of thousands of ancestors. And we need to get to know our communities for, I guess, as cultural entities, political entities, rather than like as an idea of a race, because that's when people like me are told, oh no, you're not Native. And I'm like, really? Because I'm a part of a tribe, I'm enrolled, I've been connected since birth. And it's like, no, you can't, because you're white, you're blonde. And I thought that was unusual for a Native person. And now as an adult, I realize that's quite common for a Native person because we're so mixed. But that wasn't the idea that I grew up with. And it's a really isolating kind of feeling like you don't have a cultural home in the place that you call home. And so I really wanted to create more of a presence here and a cultural touchstone for our local Native community, which is intertribal, which goes beyond the original people of this land, many of whom are still here, but also the people who now call this place home. Most Native Americans will be urban Indians. over 73% of Native Americans live in urban areas or suburban areas. And that's I think an idea that a lot of people don't have about Native people and why we think that they're invisible. But there were certain measures historically that encouraged Indigenous people to relocate to cities, to assimilate for opportunities, for jobs, for education. And so people are spread all over the place. So we wanted to make sure that we had some representation for our local community here so that we could provide that sort of cultural context and bring this kind of Indigenous knowledge into our community. And I'm really glad to be able to work on the environmental part of this as well, because a lot of people who call this place home are not connected to the land or don't consider themselves as having a relationship with the land. And that's not good for our land, because when we don't feel like we're responsible for it, that it's our job to take care of it, all of us together, that it's not someone else's job. Each of us has a relationship with this land. And so what are those concrete actions that we can take to steward it well and show other people how to steward it well? And so the relationship is a lot of what we want to reinforce through the type of education that we provide. So I'm glad to be invited to be here today.
And that's actually a great segue, because you're actually first on the agenda, and that topic is the land acknowledgement statement. So great background to all of this, but you obviously have a lot more to say. So what can you tell us about the environmental connection? Because that's obviously why you're addressing us, and the land acknowledgement statement.
You have a question, Kathy?
So I'd just like to introduce sort of partly where this came from for the rest of the Environmental Advisory Council and staff here. So we have been engaged in trying to beef up our community engagement and communication success. We've always had various efforts, but we thought with the climate action plan and sustainability planning that the city was doing, working with national, state, and local people to put together a formal plan that would essentially be a strategic plan moving forward to make us more resilient and a healthier community as we face climate action or climate change, and to figure out what climate action is needed. One of the things our consultants for communication advised was to think about having a land acknowledgement as Native American people do. A number of organizations have done that. My concern is not to be trendy and not to appropriate someone else's cultural tradition, but to acknowledge the need for such a tradition, and that we share that need, and to maybe think about what kind of a mission statement or moment for mission, like a land acknowledgement, we might want to adopt for the EAC to begin our meetings and help to focus ourselves on that connection we have and care about with the earth, and about being stewards, and that we have responsibility together towards it. So we wanted Amanda to come because we knew she's been working with lots of groups and sharing aspects of Indigenous culture, including things like land acknowledgement, and that if she was willing to come and share a little bit about the concepts and ideas, that would help us think how we could stand on the shoulders of Indigenous people and try to take that wonderful concept and adapt it to our purposes here. So that's how she got here, and we really appreciate her willingness to educate us a little more on the whole idea of and understanding of land acknowledgement.
Sure. I can talk a little bit about that because I've been having a lot of conversations about this specific topic recently we consulted with Kutztown University to draft a land acknowledgement statement, along with their diversity, equity, and inclusion administrators and liberal arts professors, and to put our heads together to craft a statement that was not just, it didn't just seem obligatory, or it just was naming who the land once belonged to, but it didn't recognize anything about relationships that other people might have with this land now, including other Indigenous people that would call this place home, that maybe aren't the original inhabitants of this land, but they are now. So how do we acknowledge that there are Indigenous people still present in this community, that we are occupying land that was the ancestral homeland here of the Lenape? But more than that, there were also so many other tribes that lived and hunted and traded in this area, and who even just passed on through. And so there was that intertribal connection going back for thousands of years. And one of the things that we want to be sure that we do, and if we do decide to move forward with crafting a land acknowledgement statement, that it's not just lip service, that it's also supported by real action. And so I can share with you, this was the draft land acknowledgement statement that we worked on for Kutztown, and it's up under the Diversity Works information for the university. And it talks about the importance of the land acknowledgements and guidelines for the use of land acknowledgements. So this is what we mean when we're talking about going beyond land acknowledgements into meaningful action. So I'll start just with the draft. It says Kutztown University resides on Lenapehoking, the traditional home of the Lenni Lenape. We acknowledge this territory once also served as a hunting ground, trade exchange point, and migration route for the Munsee, Susquehanna, Haudenosaunee, and many other Indigenous peoples. We recognize, support, and advocate for Indigenous peoples who live here now and for those who were forcibly removed. We acknowledge, honor, and respect the past, present, and future of the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land, whose presence continues in the region due to their resilience in the face of colonization. This acknowledgement aligns with our university's commitment to cultivating a diverse and inclusive community. And so when we take a look at what are some of those meaningful actions that you can take beyond just acknowledging through a statement, what does this compel me to do? So here were a couple of examples that were suggested by Dr. Adrienne Keene. She's a Cherokee scholar, and she has a blog called Native Appropriations, and talks a lot about land acknowledgements and what the difference between a meaningful land acknowledgement and token representation. And so some of those things that they suggested could be ways that we serve our Indigenous communities here. If you have space available to rent, allow Indigenous people and or communities to reserve the space more easily, like waive a registration fee or simplifies the process. Recruit Indigenous people to senior level positions as well as entry level positions in your organization. When planning events, collaborate with Indigenous communities from the beginning. Make a plan to donate monthly in the form of a land tax in your local Indigenous community. At a university, provide scholarships or free tuition to students from local Indigenous communities. At a university, develop recruitment strategies to enroll more Indigenous students. So those were just some examples of some meaningful actions that could support a land acknowledgement statement. And I don't think that it's a stretch to say that Reading would be taking that meaningful action, because one thing that fascinates me about the history of this city is just how future-minded people have been in the past. And that's an Indigenous philosophy. In any decisions that we make today, we make those not with our families and communities today in mind, but with the next 7 generations in mind. And so that's how we're planning and how we're thinking about the future. And so I think that a land acknowledgement could be a good fit. I didn't see your message there, Bethany, about sharing the screen, but I'm going to put a link in there. But I think it could be a good fit to come up with a land acknowledgement statement that honors your commitment to partnering with Indigenous communities that call this place home as you move forward with your climate action plans, as you consider what are going to be ways to think of the next 7 generations in mind. That maybe is more of an Indigenous idea, that maybe was something or an angle that had not been considered before. And you can also find out what's important to the Indigenous people of our communities, like how do they want to be a part of this climate action plan? What do they think needs to happen in order to move us forward in an honorable way? So I think it all depends on how you want to, what would be the purpose in having your land acknowledgement? Not that it would just be something you would read before a meeting to check off a box, but that it's more of a commitment and a promise that you're making every day, and that you're continuing to honor and continuing to take meaningful action to honor that acknowledgement. And the idea that we all need to be responsible stewards of this place and make sure that the Indigenous communities here also have a voice in that process.
I'd like to reflect back that we had good experience with using the concept of this, the elders, and this is a Haudenosaunee concept, actually, the elders making decisions today that are contemplating the impact on everyone through the 7th generation, which is really, in modern terms, is to commit to truly long-range planning or sustainability. Now, I think there's a lot of elements of sustainability that really are less imaginative and less visionary than thinking about 7th generation, because we're able to think about great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren, and that brings the family and relational commitment into our thinking. But certainly it's absolutely an aspect of sustainability, of saying, no, we don't just look at what's happening now and fix it for this year or even next year or even 10 years. We have to think about what the unanticipated impacts might be, what the outfall might be, who all might be affected, who might care, who could be in conflict with it, all of those sorts of things. So I really think there is something here we should think about. And I'd like people to ask questions, and then maybe we have that be a committee workshopping kind of thing to take up and think about what we would like to do in response to a better understanding of land acknowledgements. Does anybody have questions or comments for Amanda? Well, then I have one more. I would love to specifically acknowledge the role of Indigenous people, both in being true trustees of the land and good examples, and being people currently present and needing to be involved. My concern would be I really like that it's in the diversity and inclusiveness sort of area. We think of that as sort of environmental justice. From our environmental filter, we think of that as an issue within environmental justice. And I think we need to, at the same time, acknowledge the people who have just come, the immigrant people who are now making their home here and need to develop and have various relationships with the land, probably haven't had yet an opportunity to feel truly at home and connected to this land, and how I would like to be including all of our people in that acknowledgement of shared trusteeship, shared vision, and a call to action. So is there any problem with blending that, Amanda, if we were to include others specifically in our concerns for their developing relationships with the planet?
I think that the exercise of the land acknowledgement is to tie ourselves as a multicultural immigrant community to Indigenous communities and to this land. And so I don't know if anybody's familiar with Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's an Indigenous scientist. She's written a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and
Yes.
she talks about this idea of becoming Indigenous to a place, and that means that you recognize this as your land to steward as well, that this is also your home, and it's not just up to Indigenous people to take care of it. It's up to everybody, and it's something that we're all working on together in the hopes that by developing a relationship with the land, it encourages us to steward it well. Some of the issues that I see with, for example, if I had seen somebody walking across the Buttonwood Street Bridge while I was driving into work one day who had just finished drinking a soda bottle and put the lid on and then just chucked it off the bridge into the river. And I thought to myself, what kind of attitude does that mean that this person has about his relationship with this river and with this land? He doesn't feel any ownership of it or that it's his job to help take care of it. So how do we encourage environmental education that encourages people to have an active relationship with the land, and an understanding that it's your responsibility to take care of it? You start to take more personal responsibility for how you may have been inflicting harm and how you can also be a part of a solution moving forward and teaching others how to have a respectful relationship with the land.
Thank you. That's very responsive to my question, very helpful, because I think we would really want to have include a multicultural approach, and that will help us as we develop processes to engage the community to make sure that we consciously and in a focused and intentional way reach out to everyone and try and make sure all voices are heard and present. So I think that we can certainly take that angle and think about it, and as it relates to especially sustainability planning, because it's such a good model for what we need to have happen if we're going to escape annihilation, basically, self-destruction. We just really need to take a different focus and a different approach. So we really appreciate your coming. You're welcome to stay and listen and share, or you're welcome to do other things that you need to do.
I do have a comment. Just based on what she had said and what you have said, Kathy, as far as providing a way forward that is actually action-based, I'm wondering if there's any information out there that could be shared pertaining to the historical caretaking of the land that Indigenous people, how they took care of the land, and in ways that it could be done now. Just a thought.
Yeah, certainly. And maybe there are already some that that you are aware of. I think, I'm trying to think of how.
I said, while you think for a second, I'm saying, I really like that, Ann, and I'm really thinking
Mhm.
that perhaps that might be a good way to flesh out a inclusiveness and land acknowledgement type of statement, would be to, if we could collect a few stories about, and that way we can also broaden it, stories about what Indigenous peoples did with the land, stories of what good things that some of our ancestors, when settling on those Indigenous lands, actually did to protect, and even more recently, like the people that were brilliant enough to put all of Mount Penn in preservation status for all. Those are similar good things, are the right kinds of ideas, that it belongs to everyone and to future generations. And that's why you have to protect it and restrict it and so forth. So we could think of stories that relate to lots of different parts of the community. If we could, and share a little bit of that with our monthly meeting.
I guess
our
the
website.
question,
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess the question is, how do we best engage people? People don't engage by being told what to do. So they do relate to stories, and so, how could we engage the person that didn't have a connection to the river? And how do you best do that? Through storytelling and, historical, relate historically to the Indigenous people in that way. I don't know how you do that, and I don't know enough about how they tended the land back and how it would be applicable now. So I like the idea of storytelling versus telling.
Yeah. And I think we could certainly go back to Desi and David and ask them to make that be a topic for their research for the storytelling they're going to do on our sort of blog things, or don't know whether to call it a newsletter, a news website, a blog, or whatever, but whatever it is, it meant to communicate with people and share stories and let them share stories as well, ultimately. So I think that fits in really well with that effort.
And
I think it also comes to education. K through 12 education doesn't do enough to encourage us to have a solid environmental education that nourishes us as stewards as we're growing up, because that's where people's attitudes are developed and honed and solidified over time. And eventually it becomes sometimes too late to really get people to learn enough to allow them to move forward with a positive relationship in that sense. I think we can do more through K through 12 education to encourage that connection of the land and stewardship practices, and those things worked into a part of what's just a foundational education. Things like I've mentioned to Bethany before, like permaculture design, and considering how we can design our public spaces so they can feed our communities forever. And so how can we do that? Because we just need to come up with a plan and commit to carrying that out. One of the other things that I'm doing personally in promoting education is that foraging education, which was something a lot of low-income people used to rely on to get nutritious food and to supplement the meager diets that they had. We have so many natural resources in our environment in terms of food that just grows wild everywhere. Even in places in the city that are considered food deserts, there is food everywhere, but people don't know how to find it. They don't understand that there is food in their local environment. They don't know how to identify it. They don't know how to use it. They don't know how to cook it or prepare it. And maybe they have no one to learn from. And so these are all different things that we can plan for that would definitely teach people to have more of that connection and relationship with the land. And it also creates food security in our communities by having that local food access and control, and including not just cultivating our own foods and having an understanding, working with the land in that way, but also taking a look at what's already in our wild environment around us that are nutritious resources that we can teach people about, so that we're giving people more access to healthy foods, so that it's not expensive to get healthy foods. It shouldn't be costly. It should be so easy. So those are some different angles that maybe we could consider changing the relationship that people have with the land.
So
Well,
Kathy, go
that-
ahead.
I'm sorry. To that point, I would like to say that these stories don't necessarily have to be specific to Indigenous people. It can be specific to all good ideas that from other areas where they practice good stewardship of the land, and so I don't think it would necessarily have to be specific to Indigenous peoples.
I think ultimately it will be, because Indigenous people exist all over the world on every land, every piece of land. And Indigenous people have been driving forward climate activism, have been pushing for political change and laws that would help to protect the environment, to put their own bodies on the line, to stop pipeline developers from moving through. These are all of the ways that Indigenous people, they already know all over the world, and every land has its own Indigenous people, that we can take a look at what their land management practices are. And I'm sure that we will see a lot of common threads in that.
Yeah, but I think that what Anne's suggesting is what I was asking too, is it would not be offensive to Indigenous people if we share their stories and remember their contribution and their continued existence here with us. But that we can use other examples of people doing the good, right thing for the planet, and so everyone can share in an understanding of a multifaceted education about the numbers of ways that you can implement these visionary ideas that really go way back and need to go way forward.
Right. It's like they're presented as visionary ideas, but they are ancient ideas.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, in the sense that the people who are closest to the land have been the ones who developed those traditional land management practices that have been carried on through millennia. And so anybody who's carrying out these responsible land management practices now, it's based on this original idea, but there are plenty of people who are doing this work.
Yep. So we can give broader credit and include those that have learned and adapted to a good relationship with the land. Well,
there's
we'll talk about this for a long time, but I think we have to move on, and David needs to move the meeting forward. I'm sorry, Anne, I didn't step on you.
Just real quick, there are adaptations of these historical practices, and one case in point is no-till farming and the mechanical engineering that has gone into no-till farming vehicles, and utilizing those ancient practices with modern techniques. So, just stories like that.
So Kathy, the one closeout question I had, I guess, how do we move forward and incorporate what Amanda has proposed into our ongoing work? Because obviously there's some applicability here, I think, in a number of areas. Do you think we simply roll this into our existing committee structure, or are you looking at a dedicated committee to look at what she proposes?
That's a good question. I think maybe a small dedicated a dedicated maybe what we need, because we've got a separate is it could be rolled into an environmental justice committee, because we have some issues on environmental justice to work on too. And have that committee, but have this be a thing we start with. The concept of land acknowledgement, and see who would like to be on that.
And obviously, Kathy, since you're chair, I mean, you can simply create whatever committee you want to create and move forward
Right.
with it. We don't need a formal board, a vote of the EAC to create that. So, I mean, if that's your preference, I mean, we'll make sure it's reflected in the minutes, and then you can simply move forward at your convenience to get that committee established, get an initial meeting scheduled, and move forward.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's what we'll do. Ann, is that something you would like to participate in?
I am.
I know you don't have much time, but
Yeah, I'm working as this meeting is going on.
I know, I know.
and don't
I'm gonna
have
just
enough-
put you in parentheses that I'll make sure that we rope you in from time to time, or at least send you stuff and make you comment, ask you to comment.
Yeah, please do rope me in.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm thinking this may be we may call it an inclusiveness or diversity, and we have to think of a good name, but
Or
anyway.
it's like an environmental social justice. Like
It's
that
an
kind of
environmental
connection.
justice and diversity and inclusion committee, subcommittee that would work on things relating to all of our processes and our outreach and our communication, which we're working on. We have a communication subcommittee now, but I think maybe we'll roll that into an environmental justice and inclusiveness committee.
Yeah, I think the communications committee would be a good fit
Yeah.
for environmental justice.
So
All right, great.
think about that. No, I'll send something out to everybody, give it a name, and we'll get started with our project. Thanks to Amanda to focus on the indigenous people and experience and vision and relationships. And
Yeah,
how
so-
that can-
So thank you, Amanda. Very enlightening, very educational presentation, and I'm sure you are willing to remain involved in a support role for Kathy and her team as we all move forward. So thank you very much.
Yes, I guess that's a real quick question. Our subcommittees need, in fact, to be populated with other people than members of the EAC. And you don't even have to be a city resident to be on a subcommittee. So can I enroll you on our subcommittee, Amanda, at least a little bit?
Yes, of course.
All right, great.
Great.
Got you. I'll make you get that commitment, and we can really get rolling.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to back up real quick. Now that we have Ann with us, we have a quorum, so we are able to approve the minutes from our March meeting. Shelley circulated them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second? We need a second. Kathy's waving her hand, so it's been moved and seconded. Any comments, revisions, or modifications to the minutes as circulated?
Yeah, I have a revision. And I highlighted it so I could find it again, and now I can't find it. I'm sorry. We made a copy so I could find it easily.
You want to come back to it?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
nope. Go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
All right. So we'll come back to that. Moving forward into a review of old business, the first bulleted item there is our signage and mapping project. And Kathy or Bethany, where do we stand?
I'll leave it up to Bethany.
Okay. The signage project has been temporarily set to the side just because of all the other projects and events that were happening during April. and it is being picked up again. And Chris Anderson, who is with our contact with the Philadelphia Water Department, is putting me in touch with his team specifically, because he and I have not been able to come up with a mutually good time to figure out the details of the signage project. And he has recently taken a position with the EPA for District 3. So he is staying like in our general community, but switching roles to the federal side. So I am still on track to be able to have an RFP going out end of May, beginning of June for the signs. And I will keep you all posted. It's just, we're working on the nitty gritty details of what the signs will actually be, what the design will look like. And then as soon as that gets done, we'll be ready to go for RFP to start getting them built and installed.
I'm sorry, how are they proceeding on the infiltration, the impervious pavement?
They are, from what I understand, working on it. And then we're going to try to get together in the next week or 10 days to kind of finish out those details and get the actual design ready for me to bring back for approval at next month's meeting. And then
Yeah, we should try to run it by Ann for the most technical expertise, or if Ann can't, I've got maybe the second most. So,
No, I'm happy.
at least for communication of things. And I work with
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
I'm happy to look at whatever they come
Yep.
up with.
okay, once we have drafts ready to go, I will share those out and just circulate them through the group. And then, but for the actual design and everything, hopefully we'll have that actually complete in time for May's meeting.
We can go back whenever you want to the minutes, because I found my problem.
Okay.
Anything further on our signage and mapping proposal? Okay, so we're back to an amendment that needs to occur to the minutes. Kathy.
Okay, so on page 6 of the minutes, it states that Ms. Zeller's questioned if DEP draws information. This is on the topic of trying to develop a database of known toxically contaminated sites. And particularly what we were interested in is the Act 2 sites where a remediation has been done and it's required to meet certain standards, but maybe not all land use standards. So we need to keep an eye on those so that a place that was only allowed to be used for industrial purposes isn't used for a playground in the future. So we wanted to have a database that people can look at that will inform us and inform the city too, who doesn't have a complete list or filing of all of these, of what places need to be checked when there's a permit requested for changes or land use development. So in that discussion, Ann asked whether there was information available from a national program. And I said the national program is really the Superfund program. And there is a surplus list and there's a list of Superfund sites. But that's it. Here it says that I said you can't share it. No, that can be shared. What I said is that only gives us a few sites and that doesn't give us the information we're looking for. It's a state program that's one of the brownfields programs, which is we call Act 2, which allowed for the remediation of contaminated sites and for the partial remediation, which is what we're mostly concerned about, when it was only partially remediated, not to health standards for all purposes for everyone. So that's what I was saying. So we can just strike the part that I say that information cannot be shared. We can just leave it that I said it was Superfund sites, and which means it's really not everything we need based on the rest of the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very small subset
Yeah,
of sites, but
yeah, there's a handful and they're well known, and certainly, yes, we can get those from the national, but that's not what we're looking for. So we just strike, put a period after sites and just strike, and that information cannot be shared.
and
Right,
you okay with that?
I'll amend my motion as stated. Is that legalese enough?
Yes, that's exactly what you say. Very good.
All right, so with that amendment moved and seconded, all those in favor to adopt the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried. All right, going back to our old business review, I guess the next item is invasive plants and noxious weeds education. We had a nice tour 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that Kathy led up in the Hampton Heights area. Unfortunately, it was very poorly attended. Several of us were there. I found it highly educational, and as a result of that, I am continuing to rip out Japanese barberry from my property. I knew this was a problem. I didn't realize how extensive of a problem it is. And when you can see the mountain devoid yet of leaves, but barberry starting to bloom, it was just incredible to me how extensive this problem is. So I know our intent was to take that experience in Hampton Heights, which we probably need to replicate in Hampton Heights at some point, since it was not as successful as we hoped it would be, but to replicate that for the College Heights and the Pandora Park area. So I know Shelley's not on the call today, but I think it was her plan to sort of spearhead the Pandora Park tour. And in light of the poor attendance we had at Hampton Heights, I'm not inclined to do a separate college, a separate, Pandora Park tour and Eckert and kind of Hill Road. I think we should combine them into one, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think we can do that. And I definitely will redo, Bethany and I have talked, and we're planning to redo the Hampton Heights / College Heights one. It was very helpful to me to just go. I knew I didn't have the marketing out. I missed the meeting I wanted to go to remind everyone in the College Heights Association about it. I was going to leaflet all the houses along there with the poster, but we didn't get, we just weren't able to get the posters actually done with all the Earth Day stuff that had to be produced. So it was a good practice round. And importantly, the other people that came were from Mount Penn Preserve, and it's the new chair of Land and Environmental Matters, and he didn't know anything about it. And so he went away really excited and educated. In fact, he was so excited that he went, he sent his question about how do you get rid of barberry in a woods to What's My Garden, the guy from Rodale who, whose name I've now forgotten, but he's basically invented organic gardening and composting, at least part of it that Rodale is famous for, and asked it on the show. And the answer was, unfortunately, goats. Can get goats to eat it, or would be sort of an indigenous people approach, I think, and I bring in those that eat it and let them eat the food that is good for them. And we don't want where it is because we were stupid and we let it get there. And the other way is to burn it, which is also an indigenous practice, which may or may not be possible to do since it's the whole understory of the whole, well, large swaths of the mountain. But actually you can do, I've looked into this more, and you can do burning instead of setting a forest fire, which would really do the job well, but can get like go and burn the plants, like send an army of people out with little propane burners and just burn the heck out of it. So we may be able to do something like that. And
what about the bush hog that Bethany says the city owns?
No, it gets rented. We don't own one.
Oh, okay.
We have to rent it. Yeah.
I think that might be a good way to.
They're also not great on steep slopes.
Oh, okay.
It's heavy equipment. They're quite large.
Yeah.
So
I
I am my home church back in Ohio is actually part of a church group that actually owns a goat herd to deal with this kind of things. I would certainly be open to finding somebody who has a
Yeah.
goat herd that they would like us to borrow, or, you know,
It would be fun. It would be fun and educational. At
Yeah.
the least.
several areas that in Reading, especially within the mountain preserves, would be ideal.
Yeah.
For
So-
that kind of an outreach.
And just to
Maybe
share my,
Veronica, stick that in their back pocket.
yeah,
You know,
find us a
let-
goat farmer that will share.
Well, that would be a really fun event for like, David mentioned including, you know, the universities and in this process, and, you know, bringing a goat herd out there could be kind of fun and an event that they could get, you know, have fun doing. And like, in addition to that, I forget what I was, I just like bunch of people with blow torches. It kind of reminds me of the guy that, you know, burned his, you know, all of the hair off his head when he tried to kill a gnat, you know, it's
Yes.
just,
Yeah. Well, let me share that I don't really think, you know, my experience, unfortunately, all my experts when I was with DEP, and we got, you know, invasive after invasive, the zebra mussels and, you know, just things coming from the Great Lakes and lots of things. And basically, the experts always felt that once we have them, you can't stop them. You can slow it down, which is really important because then nature will eventually catch up. And the problem is it's going too fast. And so nature can't handle it. And for a while you get just this imbalance. And since we need the diversity and we need to protect it, we can't afford that imbalance while nature catches up to what humans have done. So the point of all this was really be to get people sensitized to preventing new invasives from going in. And there are some that have just started on the mountain. Japanese knotweed is an example, the garlic mustard is an example, and the Japanese stilt grass have all come in the last 2 to 3 years. So those are possible to stop the spread. And if we stop the practices like dumping yard waste in the forest, then we won't get those weeds. I'm sure that's where the garlic mustard came from and stilt grass. Somebody weeded it out, took it across the street, or took their 4 or 5 gallon buckets of weeds, dumped them over the top on Skyline Drive, or dumped them on Oak Lane, which I've taken pictures of, and you can see all the dumping that happens. And in the past, that created the barberry, acres of pachysandra that are choking out tree seedlings, and myrtle, and other things. But at any rate, so what we need to do is stop those bad practices, get people aware of it, and try and slow down letting it go up the mountain. And because now even the 30-year practices have only taken over the first 100 yards or so, and the top 150 feet or so. There's still diversity in the middle.
can I suggest that we look into renting a goat herd and creating an event out of it?
I love it. I love it. I think we should work on that.
Yeah, I don't know what committee would do that, but
Well, we've sort of stuck the invasives in with the green infrastructure, which kind of it isn't, but goats would be green infrastructure.
sure.
So,
Yeah,
so I'm cool with that. So that's what I have.
Kathy, I do,
the
I
other-
want to,
I- like
Uh,
how do goats eat barberry? They're so sharp. Like, how do they eat them?
They don't care. They just don't.
I have no idea how
They have very tough mouths. They can eat most things.
yeah, okay.
They can eat most things. Apparently it's yummy if you can get past the prickly part.
And then Kathy, I do want to mention that there is a cleanup this Saturday. I believe it's at 10 a.m. at Pandora and Mineral Springs Park, hosted by the Rotary.
Okay.
So that might be a good place to
Yeah,
do a
enlist
little
some people.
blurb, enlist some people, and maybe even set up an event in conjunction with them.
Okay. So, and the other thing I have on invasives, so that's Saturday, you said?
Yep, Saturday. Steve, it's 10 a.m.
Is it on the website?
It is not, because it's a Rotary event. We're just.
Oh, right.
Yes, it's 10 a.m. Yep.
And they're meeting where?
Pandora Park.
Pandora?
Pandora Park.
Yeah, it's usually at the covered pavilion by the basketball court. Is
Yeah.
the actual meetup.
Okay, great. The other thing I'll just share is that in the absence, since we didn't, we've been talking about having creating a EAC presentation portfolio thing that you can put on a table and have the basics about the EAC. We haven't done it yet. We don't have a banner, which we thought about doing now that we're trying to be out in the community more. So I made a really quick one with something, with a cardboard 3-piece presentation thing. And I made it on the invasive since I had slides that I could put pictures on, and then I could ask the questions about what native species do you see, what invasive species do you see, and sort of list the problem. And we also did the other part, Sarah, for you, for your part of this mission. What we wanted to do was give away and have the city give away the big bags for yard waste. And the city was willing to do that. We need money and grants. Mailman, which we can probably get. And in the meantime, Sarah got 50 bags donated. And so I was thinking, well, what we would ideally do is put EAC on some bags and put the number you have to call to get them picked up for yard waste. And so what I did, I just wrote that on, I had 10 bags, couple of packs of bags, and I just wrote EAC and call for yard waste pickup, here's the number. And so I gave out, I had the display and I talked to some people and I gave out about 6 or 7 of the bags. So we're starting to plant the idea that all of you can do this, and that the city actually provides a good yard waste service. It could be broader, but it won't be broader unless people are putting bags where people put bags out because they have so much. It gets picked up, like in my neighborhood in College Heights. We have all those oak trees and hickory trees and 50-year-old landscaping. So we've got lots of stuff that we put on the curb regularly. So it gets picked up every Monday. And Public Works has said they'd be willing to consider in the future adding some, if there were neighborhoods like around Pandora, if people started around a park like Pandora, instead, gathering up their yard waste and not dumping it across the street, that they might in the future get a pickup. But for the time being, they really need to call. So we want to help them make that easy, have the bags available, have the numbers on them. So I did get a little start for you, Sarah, and of
That's
that.
great. I can definitely do that on the bags that I have too. I don't know what number to call, but I can figure that out. Would you want some for this Pandora Park cleanup on Saturday, Bethany?
That would be neat. That would
Yeah,
be neat.
there could definitely be.
Let me just see. I have the number.
I have the number. I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, my dyslexia kicked in.
You think
877-727-7274.
That's the one.
Say it again.
877-727-7274. Somebody like thought ahead when they made our number. They really did. It spells Reading, PA.
Oh.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not available to come on Saturday, but I can get them to somebody during the week. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I can probably do it on Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a good group to partner with. They're doing a lot of cleanups on the mountain in various areas, and are also looking to do some outreach as well. So they might be a good group for us to partner and advertise with for the hikes.
Good.
All right, so good news, all of that is moving forward.
Yep.
There's a lot of work for us to do, obviously, but the year is young, and we will certainly have many more opportunities to continue this educational function throughout the year. So Kathy, on the member updates, since Shelley is not with us, I know the letter went out to Becky. Is Shelley looking for us to take some formal action today on that letter?
I think we did already take action saying that we would send the letter, and if
We did.
if there was no response, that we would notify council, but there's nothing wrong with us. I wouldn't mind taking a message that we should notify council that we would like them to consider that a vacant seat. And I can write that email, send it to Shelley and have her send it to the right.
Okay,
People.
okay, good.
The good news is I think that there are at least 2 or 3 people that I'm aware of that have said they would like to apply who are resident, who meet the categories of our priority members that we would like to attract, which would be some young people, make sure they're residents of the city, and hopefully with some diversity, like youth. We've got Sarah representing young people, but that's all we've got right now. And so we'd like some younger people. And I have, I know one of my former students who has a master's in leadership for sustainable communities, and he's African-American. His family has been involved in the NAACP and community development forever. So has good network with other people, and he's going to apply. So we have some people who can help us with our inclusiveness and outreach, who are going to apply, I think. So keep your fingers crossed. And if we have we may have as many as, we should have 2 positions still to fill. And some of us expressed a desire to be retired if appropriate, exciting young leaders would like to take over.
Several of us.
Some of us have, yes.
Several of us.
Some of us with the gray hair have said we'd be happy to mentor some young people who would like to be the next generation of to help with the trusteeship of the environment.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not as though we're unwilling to stay involved in some capacity with the
Oh, no.
EAC's work, but it would be nice for some younger leadership like Sarah to, kind of step up. It is the next generation. So, and obviously with all the work we're doing in our subcommittee structure right now, we really do need the help. So I would strongly, suggest, let's get this letter to Shelley so that she can, inform council that we're definitely willing now to consider some other nominees.
Okay, so I just have to put a to-do list that I write that email to Shelley.
Hey, while she's doing that, Steve, real quick. So the number that I have been calling for yard waste for years is the number that Frank gave me probably 6 or 7 years ago, which is the 655-6285 number, which is never a problem. It always works because the truck's always here on a Tuesday morning. But should I be using the other number instead?
Yeah, probably prefer you do that. It'll still get to the same place eventually, but going forward, use a toll-free number.
Okay, no, I will do that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I'm the only person on Mineral Spring Road who seems to put out bags. I mean, you would think my neighbors would, get the idea. I'm out there every weekend, filling these bags, but nobody else has gotten the idea yet. All right.
Put it on TikTok, David.
Okay.
Hey, I have a quick question for Bethany. Speaking of youth, did you have any success with the group that volunteers like down in Philly for like cleanup of PCSM BMPs?
Which group are you referring to?
Civilian, the.
Oh,
we have-
Climate Action Corps, yes. They will be, we're still in the recruitment process. It looks like we will have a full cohort. And the cohort will be starting the last week of May. And so
Wow.
we are looking forward to their assistance, especially with dealing with some of our invasive species, invasive plant issues, especially on some of the lands that we have to steward. So not only the mountain, but like the Dana Park site, trailheads, things like that.
Well, they could maybe help with the goat group.
Well, I'm not going to put that on them this year. I don't know if that's actually the best place to make those contacts.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
definitely
this is-
the ag people can assist.
Yeah, this is out of the Power Corps from,
Yeah, the Power Corps is our technical advisor.
which is the Vista Group in Philadelphia that's been doing this for some time. And so they are willing to branch out to Reading. I got to meet the, oh dear, and I just forgot her name.
Adeline.
Adeline. She's her official name, title is it the coordinator or?
Mhm.
Yeah, she's the coordinator for the group, and I got to meet one of the first members. So it's meant to be a both a team to do good works, good environmental works for the community and improve our environmental health and our management and trusteeship. But it's also to engage young people, and they have to be 18 to 26 or something like that. So it's also to engage young people in the work of nurturing and supporting environmental infrastructure and in the environmental part of the community. So it's after the public works projects from the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 30s that did built most of our infrastructure in our state parks and national parks. And so it's a takeoff of that a modern twist, but it's also workforce development for green jobs, and which is really an exciting part of it, that these young people will then be encouraged and will have experience that they can take to help build the green industries and green work relationships that we need going forward.
Well, one of the things that is really exciting about this group is that one of the biggest pitfalls of PCSM BMPs is the maintenance. And they will do it. And that's what Philadelphia is heavy on. That's what they use them for.
Yep.
And that's who they're going to learn from. So we're definitely
it's a career path for them.
Exactly.
But,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have to jump off. I have another meeting. So are you finished with me?
Thanks for
anything else?
participating, Ann.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks,
Sure.
Ann. Take care.
Bye.
All right, so moving on with the agenda, the next one's on me. I finally, thanks to Shelley's prodding, had an opportunity to spend some time yesterday with our plastic bag ban initiative. Nicole had prepared several materials last fall that I looked through. Philadelphia now actually has an ordinance. Nicole had pulled together a PowerPoint for us, which she presented to us before she left. And she was also working very closely with Logan Weld from the Clean Air Council, who assisted Philadelphia with the adoption of its ordinance. I think Philadelphia did a very good job in coming up with something that's replicable here in the city of Reading. What I would like to propose, since there are various legal issues involved with this ordinance, preemption is one. And Kathy, I do note that some of the definitions that Philadelphia has used are currently being challenged, but there are some ways to work around that. So what I would like to propose is I would like to pull together a draft of an ordinance modeled after Philadelphia's with some revisions Then for Kathy, and share it with Kathy. Kathy and I will then get together. We'll spend some time revising it, reviewing it, and then we will come back to the EAC with a proposal. And at that point, we'll probably continue to go through various edits and additions to the ordinance. But really, the upfront work is more legal, simply to work through some of these issues that we need to have clarified before we even bring this to the EAC for consideration. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm willing to take the laboring oar to pull that together. Philadelphia's is short, so it's not going to take a whole lot of time for me to basically copy paste, make some changes. And then Kathy and I will spend some, we'll schedule some time to get together to review that, kind of work through the legal issues, and then come back, hopefully in a month or two with something that the entire EAC can consider.
I think that sounds like a great plan. Anybody else? Anybody questions?
Yeah, I just have one comment. Last week, after I got asked on the cow about the plastic bag ban again and had to tiptoe a way around it, I did stop in for lunch over at Mi Casa Su Casa so I could specifically ask a few questions from Jahani, because not only is she a council member, she's also a small business owner. And the concerns that Nicole and I and many of the other members of this committee had last fall was that the big box stores that can afford to switch their bags are all in the suburbs. The mom and pop stores who have less access to the kind of high quality bags that we're looking for are all in the city, and they're all individuals standing alone. And I really think that in order for it to be successful, we need to find a way to get the business community to come together to propose the solutions that they would like to work with. And perhaps even assisting. It's not in the purview to do this for them, but to figure out a way that we can at least get them all in the same room and they can figure out how they can purchase these bags together.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that Nicole already flagged, and that's not a legal issue. So
right, it's not a legal issue, but that's something that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, it is a very good point, and I forgot to mention that because it's something Nicole had already flagged, and I know we will need to address it and work through it. But that's not something that Kathy and I will be able to work on, but certainly we will, make sure that there's a placeholder in the proposed ordinance that addresses that very issue so that the entire committee can work through that.
Yeah, that'll take, that's a really community, engagement of the stakeholders kind of issue. And we need everybody's heads thinking about that. Interestingly, I would just share that when I was manning our Earth Day table, even though all I had there visible was the invasive species display and talking about that. That's the one question that I was asked about something else is what's happening with the plastic bag thing? And isn't the EAC going to do something? And that was one person. And then another person said, if you're going to do something about plastic bags, it shouldn't be just the city because exactly that issue. So that's the issue that was raised to me. And I only had, I only had a dozen people talk to me. So that was interesting that's two of them wanted to talk about the plastic bag issue. So it's important.
All right, so it is almost 20 after, and we should try to wrap things up in the next 10 or 15 minutes. As I'm looking through the rest of the agenda, there are several items that I think we still need to cover quickly. I'm not sure if Bethany needs to say anything about the electricity agreement. I know environmental justice policy, Kathy, you may have something on that. I actually have something to add as well that I learned at PBI's environmental forum last week. I know from Shelley's perspective, we need to come to an understanding about our outdoor meeting locations, if any, for May through September. And in light of the page 1 article in the Reading Eagle today about Bernhardt's finally starting to be breached, I didn't know if the public works folks had any update for us on Bernhardt's. So I at least would like to get through those 4 agenda items in the next 15, 20 minutes if possible. So Bethany, anything you need to add today on the electricity agreement?
No, other than we are proceeding to select a consultant to assist us. So.
Yeah, good, good. So Kathy, what I will add very quickly, and then I'll let you take over on the on DEP's environmental justice policy update. I can't tell you how many presenters. So for those of you who are not environmental lawyers, most of you on this Zoom meeting, every year the Pennsylvania Bar Institute holds an environmental forum sponsored by the environmental and energy section of the Pennsylvania Bar Association. Typically attended by 150, 200 lawyers. It's a two-day event with many, many presentations by environmental lawyers, DEP staff, DEP lawyers, DEP program folks, EPA lawyers and staff, environmental consultants. And I can't tell you how many DEP presenters this year spoke about environmental justice, as did Patrick McDonald, Secretary of DEP, who told all of us that regardless of what program you're dealing with at the department or what issue you're dealing with, they are now viewing everything through an environmental justice lens. It is a new policy initiative, so it's something that we all need to be mindful about as we deal in this area. And certainly for the city of Reading, it's a tremendous opportunity for us. So Kathy, I just wanted to share those comments with you, Kathy, because really presentation after presentation, they kept coming back to environmental justice and how this is really the next wave that all of us as environmental practitioners need to be thinking about. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix for you.
Great. I'll try and keep this short. I will mention that Bethany, obviously, but I did attend the meeting with Secretary McDonald, the press event on Earth Day, which we should feel honored that he just, I mean, it's a big deal. They decide where it's important to go, where the Secretary of DEP should go on Earth Day to do press events. And he came to Reading. I imagine he went home to Allentown area too, but so we got highlighted because of our work on our climate action and sustainability plan, and work being one of the cities that stepped up to work with and with DEP and use their program and the federal money to get our first draft. We'll get our inventory, greenhouse gas inventory, and get our first draft. So we did have representation there. Patrick was a deputy secretary when I was a deputy secretary, and he was a little kid who came to our office every day after the work down, because I had an assistant who was his age and friends. But at any rate, so I got to renew what's going on. And it's very clear to me that they are very serious about this now. There's always been well, not always. There was an environmental advocate created by 25 years ago by the legislature, and it was turned into being, instead of an ombudsman, which it originally was, it was turned into being an environmental justice person. And it was one person, and nobody paid any attention to him or her. It was usually a her. And when I was there only 10 years ago, it was still somewhat token, although I really believed in it. So I went on tour with a project that they did with the Black Legislative Caucus. Well, I was in charge of the sustainability money from 2007, 2008, the original American Rescue Plan money. And I was in charge of it for DEP. And so I went on a tour to get minority businesses signed up to get that money. But that was like the one big thing that happened the whole 8 years that I was there. There's one person in DEP working on it. Now they have, not only do they have a new policy and they've been working on it for 2 years, but they have a regional person in each of the regional offices, which means it really will be tied, because structurally that's how permits and the interface with the public happens on the regional office level, not out of central office. So having a person in each office is really, really important. Signals that they're actually going to do it. And it's now not just selected permits, as David said. Patrick said Two, and that's what the website says, that it's to be in all of their processes, in all of their programs, that everybody needs to be thinking about inclusiveness and in process that will let everybody participate and let all voices be heard. So it's a real thing. Unfortunately, I totally missed, or if I saw it, I thought, yeah, they're gonna do what they already do. Nobody knows about the existing policy that was from 2002 or so. Nobody knows about it. Nobody cares about it. I didn't worry about it. Well, this is for real. We could comment as in writing by May 11th, but this is the end, and they sort of did. There's one more public participation session. I don't think it's necessary for us to testify, spend 5 minutes being important and testify at the public hearing, the video public hearing. I do think we ought to, our city definitely ought to raise their hand for, thank you, we appreciate this, please really do it. And since we have a majority minority city, one of the only ones in Pennsylvania. And the other things, we have several minority populations, we have indigenous people, we want to have all of that included. So I don't know what you want to do, but I'm thinking we should at least have submit written comments on it. I would be happy to try and draft something. We won't have time before our next meeting because it's May 11th. But I could circulate it and see if everybody's comfortable. Because it just seems we should be in the record as applauding that they're going to broaden it, apply it to everything they do, and note that we're a community that has been disadvantaged because of the lack of processes that are consciously thinking about environmental justice.
Yeah, I think that is a very good idea. I mean, they obviously already have us on their radar screen, but it would be nice for us to acknowledge that we're aware that you're now focusing on red and kind of here's why. So I'd be more than willing to comment on that if you could pull something together for us. Yes.
Okay, then I will write something. I started reading some of it. It really is pretty good. It's so much better than, it was very limited. It was limited to certain permits that we'd gotten in trouble. Basically, solid waste permitting was where environmental justice rubber hit the road. People objected to having hazardous and any kind of waste facilities in the Chester City was the poster child for environmental justice in the Northeast, because the city had 6 solid waste treatment facilities and the rest of the county, the wealthy white part of the county, had 1. So that was one of the big cases that took place. So Pennsylvania really needs to deal with environmental justice and needed to, and they just took baby steps until now.
All right, so yeah, we'll certainly get that submitted. Great. Kate.
Okay, awesome. Sorry to be wordy.
All right.
Share about that one.
So I know
Scott has
Scott's
his
raising
hand
his hand.
Yes, Scott.
So I was actually out at the dam today. The dam's down about a foot at this point. At the bottom of the dam. So you can see, you're starting to see a lot of the ground come up on the far end. And yeah, it's gonna go quick.
So did the paper say this morning, I forget, that this is going to be 1 week, every week it's going to be lowered another foot for several weeks?
I think every day.
Every day?
No,
Okay.
it's a foot per day. It
Okay.
should take around 2 weeks depending on the weather.
Okay, gotcha.
And then what happens?
And we find all kinds of stuff in the bottom.
Exactly.
There's some engineering and some lead remediation work that has to be done, and then decisions will be made.
Okay, so there is, who's our consultant on that? Do you know? Who's lowering the dam? I mean, who's draining the dam and gonna do the,
AECom.
okay. Okay.
All right, so I guess the only remaining item we have to consider is where we want to meet in May, June, August, and September. Historically, before COVID, we always met at outdoor locations during that period of time. I believe there's at least one, maybe two, maybe even two of us on this meeting today who would prefer that we continue meeting by Zoom regardless of COVID status, because it's simply more convenient. But if we are going to resume outdoor meetings, even if maybe only for one of those months, Shelley would need to re-advertise that meeting, which is why she wants a heads up where we want to be for the next 4 meetings. So what is everybody's pleasure?
Well, I would vote for spending some time in the parks, both in memory of Andrew and because I think it's a good idea. And our communication consultant said we should be seen out in the community, and I tend to agree with that. So could we split the baby and maybe do June and August in a park? Maybe just pick Pandora because it works and it's got cover for us. So that would be my suggestion, that we stay Zoom on May and go back Zoom on September, but we spend the 2 summer months that we're likely to see people in the park, that they can see their EAC actually goes out and cares about the parks and is happy to meet with people.
Sarah, were you the one that had some logistical issues with meeting at the parks?
Yeah, just because I'm at work, but June I'll be away. And do we not have a July meeting?
No,
We do not. We
Okay.
combine our July and August meeting into a single meeting.
Okay. So August, yeah, I can most likely make that day like my remote day and then just come to the park. It
Okay.
is tougher though. But if I gotta miss it, it's okay. I like the idea of doing the virtual still May and September.
Okay.
okay, that would be good. And we could probably, if you needed a Zoom in, we could, do the limited Zoom we can do like on a laptop. Somebody can bring a laptop and we can, if we can
Or
get
there'll be
Wi-Fi access. I don't know if we can get, I think I
Would
have
you-
hotspots that might work, but
It would probably be a phone, but
we'd have to use a phone.
Make
Yeah,
it up,
we'd
yeah.
probably have to use a phone, but if need be, we could just have you a disembodied voice.
We can make it work. I've participated in Zoom meetings on my phone throughout the city. It's worked well. So if we have
Yeah.
to hook you in that way, Sarah, we can certainly do that.
Okay,
Okay,
that sounds
so
good.
I'll-
Thank you.
Then I'll move that we have a Zoom meeting in May and September, and that we publish, that we will have our June and August meeting in Pandora Park at the pavilion.
Okay, I will second.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Ayes have it. All right, it is 1:33, almost 1:34. Anything else for the good of the order that you need to address today? If not, our next meeting is Tuesday, May the 24th at noon, which will be a Zoom meeting again.
Okay, did we, I've been on someone, has Veronica had a chance to tell us what she's doing? You understand she's the new one and is doing urban agriculture. Did we get, other than that, is there anything you would like us to be thinking about, Veronica, to help?
We are planning on applying to a USDA urban ag grant. We had a greenhouse meeting this morning. I think it's a little bit different from that, and a different application. So that is
Yes.
a 3-year urban ag grant that can go in a lot of different ways. So I just look forward to talking to folks in the community more about what that could look like. And so that's probably the biggest thing, kind
So
of
you
down
keep-
in the community. We're currently working with South of Penn Task Force on a vacant lot in their neighborhood that neighbors seem pretty excited to transform into a backyard garden space. So we have plans for that, but that's kind of probably the main things is kind of the next steps in kind of looking out at least 3 years urban ag in the city of Reading and what that can look like.
That would be wonderful. Thank you
So
for that update. Just so everybody knows, I attended the greenhouse project thing for Shelley, and that will be, they've done a lot of the good legwork so that it can be brought council fairly soon as a concept. And we'll share more of that. But basically, the one thing you should know is Public Works will continue to own and maintain and will invest in the greenhouse. We'll obviously need lots of outside partners, but we're not selling it or making a profit-making organization or anything like that. So when you hear that being said, say, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
The city will continue to have it in City Park and be a resource for the community. It will need partners to do programming like Brooks Nature and watershed groups and community gardens. Like we'll all get a chance to do programming that relates to it when it gets fixed up.
Yes, please squash that rumor. It's galloping. And then Steve, did you have anything to add since we completely skipped over you?
That's fine. We were able to secure a grant from the Pennsylvania DEP for $350,000 for a new vehicle for yard waste and 2 new leaf machines. So we'll be purchasing them. Yeah, we'll be purchasing them sometime later in the year.
Oh,
And
that's
again,
very exciting.
DEP, so it helps out with our organics recycling.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great.
So what type of yard waste vehicle?
It's just going to be a packer.
Okay.
But exclusively for that. That's all it can be used for, is for bags of yard waste, and we take them to the recycling facility.
Okay.
Oh, that's wonderful. So now I don't feel so guilty about telling people to get their bags out there. And I'm thinking, oh, my dear friends in Public Works string me up because they have enough trouble getting to the people that are already putting bags out. But if we have another truck and we have some money to do that, that's wonderful. That'll help. Great.
Steve, what was the amount?
Around I think 347. Yeah, we just received notification yesterday. I applied for it last summer.
Oh, that's so exciting. Wonderful. Good work. Good work.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you needed to share?
I think I'm good. We did around a dozen cleanups over the weekend in conjunction with Earth Day. We had around preliminary numbers around 325 people at a dozen different sites, and we cleaned up about 4.1 tons of litter and a bunch of bulk items. So a pretty good start.
That sounds real good. Yeah.
And then in June, tentatively, we're just working on the planning for this. We're going to do a dumpster day, which is where we have dumpsters at probably around 10 to 12 sites throughout the city, and where people can take their household junk. And we're looking at the weekend of Juneteenth, which is, I believe, the 18th, Saturday. So
and we will need volunteers to help staff the sites and provide education and outreach.
Yeah, we're going to do a citywide cleanup the same day, so it'll be a fairly significant event.
Great.
Details coming soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's some really good things to end on.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, thanks to one and all. We all have a lot of homework over the next couple of weeks, and we will see everyone back for our May meeting on the 24th.
Thank you, David.
So long, everyone.
Take care, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Amanda. You okay, Beth?
Yep, I'm okay.